Okay, we're gonna have a safety meeting today, and this will be a safety meeting probably like no other you've seen. I'm gonna call this safety meeting like no other. And so a little bit about me. I worked for many years for a contractor, mostly into the oil business. We called ourselves consultants simply because if you call yourself a consultant, you can charge more. But really, we were contractors, and we did a lot of PSM work. We did work with procedures and unit description manuals and safety training and procedures, a lot of various odd and assorted compliance things around operators and operator training and safety and things like that. So because we were contractors, consultants, we were in and out of a lot of facilities and I worked many different facilities with the company I worked for. And so if I listed off the companies, you'd recognize them. It's all the major players and some of the minor ones. And so we were traveled a lot into a lot of facilities. And I also left that job and worked for one of the large companies. And so I did work in refineries and chem plants and pipelines and onshore and offshore and saw people from the entry level guys on up to all the way up the food chain, right? Superintendents and VPs and a lot of plant managers and a lot of chief operators and a lot of new guys and just did a lot of stuff around training. And because of that, I saw a lot of people, saw a lot of instances, saw a lot of things. And so since I've just retired, this is my rant, really. This safety meeting we're having here is really my rant is before I ride off into the sunset. Because since I'm no longer working for a company, I can speak openly and honestly about what I saw. And because I was in the business for so long and saw so many facilities, I think I can speak authoritatively. So before I jump in, first of all, if you're an attorney, if you're a corporate lawyer, then I'm not talking about your company. I'm talking about somebody else's company. But if you're in operations, then I probably am talking about your company because I was either, like I say, I did this a long time and I was in and out of a lot of facilities. So I was pretty good chance I was either at your facility or one owned by your company or one just like it because I mean I lost count how many times I was in. So good chance of what I'm saying here will ring true for what you guys experience. So I've just got a kind of a random list of things here that I saw in the business that impacted safety and people's ability to work safe and company operations. And so one of the things I saw was that many companies, if not most, put schedule over safety. Schedule over safety. And I know all the slogans, safety first, all those. I've heard them all. But if you look at what actually happens, schedules over safety. And here's a little test. If you don't believe me, then do this test. If you guys think you're putting the safety first, then here's a test. And you can't tell anybody you're doing this or it'll ruin it. But go find the newest, least experienced guy on the crew. And you'll have to do this in private and you'll have to work it out some way because if they it'll ruin this guy's career basically if you're not careful. But go find the newest, least experienced guy and get him to actually do a stop work. Get him to actually do a stop work. How many times have you ever seen anybody that's on the crew say, "Gee, I'm just not comfortable with this. This is a little unsafe. Let's just stop until we figure this out." Well, they say people have stop work authority. Go find a green hat guy, a least experienced guy, and get him to actually do one and see what happens. Because I saw people do it and get fired. I saw people's careers ruined when they did it. And the first time that happens, nobody else is going to do it again. So I don't care what's in the policy. What I saw over and over again, schedule over safety. And people were more afraid of getting sued for co-employment rules than ensuring that the contractors are trained and safe. And they're more focused on meeting the deadline and the money. It's a lot of money. We all know that, but so is human life. And so I saw too many times schedule over safety. And if you don't, if you think you're putting safety first, then I'm calling your bluff. Do a stop work and see what happens, right? And I remember one, OSHA is just as bad. There was one place where I had guys on my crew that was going out to this one site that was under construction, and they were doing a rebuild, and they had my guys coming back to me saying, "Oh, we've got uh, guys working at heights that's not tied off. We've got excavations, holes in the ground that's not marked off. We've got out there fixing to start up when the fire system's not in place. All these safety violations that were just rampant at this one facility, and nobody in management was doing anything about it. And so okay, this is a legitimate, no kidding safety risk. These guys are cowboys out there. They're really going to cause some kind of a problem. And nobody in management was doing anything about it. So one of these career limiting moves, if they figure out you did it, I called OSHA. You hear about these whistleblower people? Well, I actually did it one time. Called OSHA, didn't do any good. You know how you guys are having trouble finding good people? Well, it's worse over at the OSHA office because they get all the guys that you guys wouldn't hire, right? And so called these people and they wouldn't come out. I mean, I was listing off all the safety violations, and they said unless I had personally witnessed a felony, then they couldn't do anything about it. Wouldn't even take the report. And so didn't really have a lot of faith in OSHA. They just, especially in the rural areas, it's not away from the, out away from the, the main work areas where a business is. Nobody out there. I mean, I saw plants being built in very rural areas that were built completely greenfield plant built with no PSM. In this day and age, they had no procedures, no unit manuals, no safety policy document, none, zero, zip, and because nobody checked it. They just built it. You'd think that never happened in a day like this, but it did. And it's because they're way out in the middle of nowhere, no OSHA people, nobody's audited them. They just said, okay, we'll have all that stuff in place before the audit happens, and we can get the plant built faster than that. So they just went ahead and did it. They weren't even going to build an alarm horn until one of the first line supervisors put his foot down and said, we will have an alarm horn, right? So that's the kind of facilities we have. That particular plant, because it was done in such a hurry and all, we knew it was happening like that. And we were told they've got their hands full. They know the problems. They know they need procedures. They know they need all the PSM stuff. Don't bug them. They'll call you when it's time. Well, meanwhile, they blew it up. And when I say blew it up, I mean blew it up, blew it up. It's on YouTube. This is a huge explosion. I mean, I saw, you go out where there's all that caliche rock and it's a 50-foot hole in the ground, 60 feet wide, solid rock just blown out. Big old 24-inch pipes with 2-inch thick walls just split open like a banana thrown over there. This was a no kidding explosion. Why did it blow up? Because the least experienced guy that they didn't train blocked it in and put heat on it with hydrocarbons in it. And nobody told him what happens when you block it in and put heat on it. I mean, really, this stuff happens. I saw it. And the tragedy on top of tragedy, that was the same facility that 4 months later, they had rebuilt it, ready to start it back up again. And they had guys out there that couldn't tell you how the basic pieces of equipment work. Separator is just a wide spot in the line where the water falls out and the oil falls over a weir. No moving parts. They couldn't tell you how that worked. And I saw, in all seriousness, while it was down, they were rebuilding it. I saw they put all the young guys out there. Now we're going to have them go trace lines after we blew up the plant, right? And so they were out there with a set of P&IDs, tracing lines. I saw the whole crew, 6 of them, spend 20 to 25 minutes trying to find a block valve. It's on a PNID, got to be around here somewhere, looking around for the block valve. You board guys, how many times can you afford to wait 20 minutes when the unit's fixing to crap out on you? And it's a no kidding, hey, we got to do something here. And the outside guy takes 20 to 25 minutes to find a valve, find the block valve. Got to be around here somewhere. I mean, you can't run a plant like that. So when they were starting it up with those kind of guys out there, I put it in an email and sent it to my boss and a couple other people. Okay, well, now they care, right? Because they don't want to go to jail because it got written down somewhere. So I get this call, me and my boss, from the corporate attorney. Now they care. Hey, this kid's in trouble. Tell that boy not to write that stuff down anymore. So they care about not writing it down, but they don't care enough to wait and actually make sure they know what they're doing before they start it up. That plant's second line supervisor, again, they had just blown it up 4 months before. And they're starting it up with guys that didn't know what they were doing. And I go to the second line superintendent and I say, look, you've got about one guy on each crew out there that knows what they're doing. And the other ones are out there trying to find the valves and trying to find the lines as the unit's running. That's your outside operators. And this guy says, well, that's more than it. This exact quote. He said, that's more than we had at the last plant I worked at. So I think we're okay. So that qualifies as gross negligence. That qualifies as gross negligence. What they were worried about was me writing it down. They were more worried about that. But they ought to go to prison. If you're knowingly, willingly starting it up when you know the guys out there don't really know it and can't react quickly in an emergency, then that's gross negligence. You ought to go to prison. And if I've seen it happen too many times, schedule over safety. And if you don't believe me, I'm calling your bluff. Go out there and do a stop work and see what happens. Do a stop work, see what happens, see how long you keep your job. And so here's another concept that happens all too often, is that because of all the government regulations, we got regs coming out our wazoo, okay? We get so focused on compliance, and I'm not knocking that. Compliance with the regs is important. I get it. It can cost you money. But I don't know how many times I frustrated me because I couldn't get the concept across to the managers, is that compliance does not equal safety. Compliance does not equal safety. I remember there was one place I went that we got called into this job, and I drive up to this plant, this facility, first time I'd been there. And when I first get there, there was this big sign over the front gate. When I first drove up, it said OSHA Star certified, and they had 5 years, 5 times. They had gone through this OSHA Star program. And with that, you get audited more closely. And they had 5 times they had gone through this audit, and there was no inks or dings, no issues. They had all the PSM materials in for 5 audits in a row. No problems. They had all the procedures in place, all the documents, all the training records. They had all that stuff in place. And big sign over the front gate bragging on it. Well, the reason they called me in is because they blew up a furnace on a startup and sent 3 guys to the hospital. Well, I get to digging around looking at their procedures and their documentation, and you couldn't use them. You couldn't actually use them to do the job because the way they'd written them, it was just too cumbersome. The average operator, it's gobbledygook. There's too many documents. They're too spread out. There's one of them referenced the other that referenced the other. And it was very cumbersome. You couldn't use them to do a job. And so they weren't using them. They had all the documentation. And when the idiot auditor comes by, they say, oh, look, we've got all the procedures. Here they are. We've got all the training records. Here they are. But nobody learned anything in the training. and nobody actually used the procedures, you couldn't. The way they were structured, they were just bad. And so just because you complied with the reg doesn't mean you're safe. And they blew up a furnace and sent 3 guys to the hospital. That same plant in another one had a fire that killed 2 or 3 people. I mean, it's just okay. We complied. So I don't know how many times I went to managers and I said, okay, I get it. We got to comply, but we also have to make sure that people know what they're doing. Because here was my phrase: it's never been the case ever, never in 25, 30 years in the business. Not once did I ever see after the accident, after you leaked methyl ethyl death in the river, or after the explosion, or after the guy got hurt, then the guy with the badge from the government comes in. I never ever saw him say, "Oh, yeah, you leaked chemicals in the river, and you had a fire, and you had this environmental leak, and this guy's legs hurt here. But golly gee whiz, all your paperwork's in good shape, so you're okay, no problems." No, it doesn't work like that. You could have every box checked on every compliance document. And if somebody actually gets hurt, or if you actually leak something, you're guilty automatically, 100%. And so what you really ought to be focused on is keep the blood inside the guy and the oil inside the pipe. If you keep the blood inside the man and the oil inside the pipe, then guess what? It'll go a long way towards not getting fined by the guy with the badge from the government. And I don't know how many times I went to people and I said, I get it. We've got the training things, but we have to make sure they actually know what they're doing. We have to make sure they actually, no kidding, can react in an emergency. If there's a significant upset, they've practiced it, they know what they're doing, that if you ask them, they can spit out the answers. We got to make sure of that, because just because I pull out some training record that said okay, they completed a class, if somebody gets hurt, you're guilty. And I don't know how many times I went to HSE department and said, oh, we've got all of this compliance stuff, but I'm worried that they don't actually know how to work safe, really. And the answer was, oh, we never thought of like that before. You're a safety department. You're supposed to look at whether they actually know what they're doing, not whether the box is checked. And so compliance does not actually ensure safety. It just serves in compliance. And if somebody gets hurt or something leaks, you're not in compliance, regardless of whether all the boxes are checked. I mean, you're just not. So we have to make sure people actually able to work safe, really. You have to actually put it into shoe leather. I don't know how many times I was the one that had to bring these things up, and I was the one that, oh, you just troublemaker here. You're not a team player. Co-employment law. My goodness, I don't know how many times I went around. We had contractors that, okay, I get it. We've got the records from the contractor that sent the things in. There's this set of laws. All the lawyers are worried about getting sued because of co-employment law. And so we can't train contractors, they tell me, because of co-employment law. And so what actually happens is, oh, we got them to sign a document and says that we're not liable and we're not going to train them. And on top of that, the the responsibility for training them falls on them. And we've got the records that they actually trained. Well, what you've got are the records that says they were trained. And some of them, I've been there, guys, some of all these contractors hire an admin and they cheat. They just hire a temp, fill out the forms, and send it in and say, we trained our people. There was no, even the ones that go through the training. We had a contractor, he was a good contractor, one of the better ones. And I had their training records. And I one time I said, okay, we're going to test this to see how much they actually know. And I randomly picked a guy out of the list of contractors that had it was his first hitch. He had been there less than 2 weeks. He had taken the training from this. I purposely picked a guy who was brand spanking new, and he had taken this training from this contractor less than 3 weeks before. And I knew the contractor, knew the person that led the training group, knew they actually put them through training. I want to see what they actually learned. So I call this guy and I play dumb, which is easy for me to do. But I play dumb. I say, "Oh, did they put you through some sort of training before you got here?" I had the guy's training records on my desk right in front of me when I was calling this guy. I knew exactly what he took. It was the same list of courses that they put everybody through. And so, but I was playing, okay, I was playing dumb, just tell me. Which, and he couldn't remember the names of the courses. Couldn't remember the names of the courses, let alone, I didn't even get into details about what he actually learned in the class. He couldn't even remember the titles of the courses. I fished around for 20 or 25 minutes. Can you remember any of the names of the courses that you were, oh, I can't remember. I finally had to blurt it out. Did they give you confined space training? Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I think that was in there somewhere. So you take a guy that's used to working with his hands, and what do? You sit him down in front of a computer for 3 days straight and taking these death by PowerPoint courses, and that, oh my goodness, and so they don't learn anything really. And so this is why I always thought the key guy in this whole operation is the company operator that has to be the interface with the contractors. I saw people that got fired from companies because they're incompetent, that would show up a month later on the same facility working for a contractor, right? These are people that really don't need to be here. And so the person that really needs to make sure all this stuff happens is the operator that's working for the company that's interfacing with all these contractors. You guys have to have enough kahunas to throw them off the plant, throw them off the site if they're not safe. And the company needs to stand behind you. You guys need to be the big dog. You guys need to look them in the eye and say, you ain't going to act like that here because this is my unit. And we're going to be safe here. And if we're not, you're stopping. We're going to go over into the shack and we're going to sit down. We're going to talk this through because this ain't happening out here on my unit. That has to happen. It just has to. Because if you guys don't do that, nobody else is going to do it. Because I've seen admins at these the cowboy Yahoo contractors pay admins just to fill out the forms. Even the ones that went through the training never learned anything. One time I went to legal. I had to bypass HR because all HR does is try to prevent lawsuits. They're not interested in safety. They're not. They're not. And if you say they are, you're a liar. I saw it too many times because what I would have to do is a bunch of facilities at the place I worked, scattered out all over creation. We never heard it. So about once a month, I'd sit down and look through the news wires and find the people that made the news. These are just the ones that made the news. And at the place I worked, major company, at somewhere in one of our facilities, we averaged about one person a year dying at our facility. And they were all contractors. And so, and of course, you don't spread that around because legal don't want it known. And so uh, I just searched the news wires about once a month, and about one person a year got killed, died some kind of way. And I had them on the wall over my desk. So when anybody gave me trouble, I'd just point at them and I'd say, here's how this guy died. Here's how that guy died. Here's how this guy died. And so, but we're not going to train them because they're contractors. So I finally had to go to legal. And I said, look, I get it. Co-employment, we're worried about them soon. We don't want to be legally responsible for the training of these guys. That said, these contractors hire Bozo, and Bozo is a clown. And all it's going to take is one bozo coming on our facility, touching our stuff. And if all he has to do is do something stupid and kill himself, and we're the ones that's going to get the wrongful death lawsuit by his family. And so, what's more risky? Somebody might sue you because they think you're trying to train them, or somebody will sue you when Bozo hurts himself on our facility. What's more likely? And to sit here and list, okay, here's the 5 guys in the last 5 years that got killed on our facilities. Which one of them do you think is actually more likely to happen? And the lawyer says, oh, I get it. Like they never thought of this before, right? And that made HR mad at me because now I'm trying to, okay, we got to train these guys. You have to make sure they know what they're doing, or at least throw them out. So that just what all got me frustrated. And unions, you guys are a piece of work. I worked at a place where there was a guy that really didn't have any business working in this industry. He really didn't. He didn't have enough upstairs. He was not the brightest bulb in the box. He was so incompetent, he was dangerous. And you don't take dangerous, incompetent people and put them working with dangerous equipment that could blow up and kill half the county, unless you're a union, in which case, oh, we're just doing our union job, protecting our union brother. Don't tell me that, because if you're the union rep, if you're the steward, and you're out there defending these guys that are going to hurt me and hurt the company I work for and end up hurting themselves, and you're the one that's going to have to go look at his wife and kids and say, Dad's not here anymore, because we didn't say, oh, this guy really don't need to be in this business, and the union defended him. No, I mean, I get it. I know all the union politics. Figure out a way to get rid of them, because if you don't, it's going to come back and bite you. I mean, there was one place I worked. The guy was so incompetent in the union. The union just kept it defending him, and they'd file grievances and defend him and all this stuff. Well, every now and then they'd get a manager. He couldn't learn anything. The guy was dangerous. Every now and then they'd get a manager that said, okay, I'm going to document enough to get this guy's either going to perform or he's going to get out of here. We're going to train him. We're going to do whatever we need to do, but we're going to prove that he's either competent or incompetent, and we're going to document it one way or the other. And if he's not, we're going to get him out of here. Well, this guy would hurt himself. I mean, like hurt himself, like break his foot, blow out a knee, and now he's out for 6 months. And if he's out for 6 months, then you got to retrain him again. That takes another 2 or 3 months. And by then, the manager probably flipped over because none of them hang around. And this guy had been there 20 years and he was totally incompetent. Do not defend those guys. They're dangerous. They don't have any business working in this industry. Find a way. If you got to save face with the union, whatever you got to do, just get them out of here. They really don't have any business. They're going to hurt somebody. And so, okay, lawyers, if you're the attorney and you're out there, I get it. It's your job to keep this company out of lawsuits, but the managers have to have enough kahunas to run the operation. The lawyers don't run operations. Lawyers don't run operations. Lawyers give advice. And the manager has to make a decision to where, okay, this contractor is the only ones we can get, can't speak English, really dangerous stuff. I'm going to take steps to keep them from, like what happened, the one I did. There was 2 guys out there, couldn't speak English. Nobody trained them. They're supposed to know what they're doing, but they don't. And nobody taught them how to check, see if there's pressure behind this flange that we're unbolting. And it blew and cut both of them in half. Because, okay, so now who's responsible? I can't live with myself knowing that, oh, well, it was the other guy's responsibility and it wasn't my job. No, look the lawyer in the eye and say, we're not going to have people out there unless they really know what they're doing. And if we don't have a choice, I'm going to train them. And Mr. and Ms. Lawyer, go back to your office. I'll call you if I need you. right? Because you can't have people dying. You just can't. You can't have these idiots out there, contractors that don't know what they're doing, working on your site with your chemicals and your equipment and your life at stake. You just can't. Co-employment be damned. And you have to train those guys, or at least make sure they know what they're doing, or kick them out. You just have to. The contractors, some of them legitimately train their people to be safe. Some of them pay an admin to forge the training records, and most of them do as minimum amount of training as they can, and they send people out there that are just flat dangerous. And even the ones that aren't, there's human error. People, okay, my wife just left me, my kid's sick, I'm not thinking. You got to have somebody else that has enough kahunas to tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, let's stop this, go up to the shack, and we're going to talk this through, because you ain't going to keep doing this here. Okay. um, Another place I worked, we went in, and it was a major plant. We looked at their procedures, we looked at their training materials, we looked at their stuff, and we said, you know, your procedures need help, and your training, it's just not where it needs to be. And so the company says, yeah, well, you know, money's kind of tight, and we don't really need that right now. We're going to pay you to do these other things. Okay. And I knew at the time that was a mistake, because they really needed help on their procedures and their training. Well, I go and do my job. 5 months, I think it was, six maybe, after I left that facility, it blew up, killed 15 people. 15 died in a giant explosion. And I, we were all waiting at my company, me and everybody else, to see what the, you know, the giant report from the government comes out. And guess what they recommend: procedures and training. And so I promised myself then, never again would I sit quietly by and let somebody just say, yeah, we don't need that, without speaking up and saying my piece, because I had a solution. I had a solution that I knew they needed, and they didn't want to do it, and I didn't speak up. And I told myself, never again would I just sit silently and take what the guy said, without at least looking him in the eye and saying, you know, here's what really needs to happen. That same company, not a year and a half later, at a different facility, same company, different facility across the country, get hired to go in there. They had 350 operators. 300 of them, of those 350, were there less than 3 years. They had, out of 350 operators, they had 50 of them that had been there longer than 3 years. And so what they wanted me to build was an operator qualification program, where somebody were getting the final checkoffs were done by unqualified people. And I say, you can't do that. You can't have an operator qualification program where the people qualifying them are not qualified. You just can't. And they said, well, we don't have any choice, because we don't have enough qualified people. And I pushed it and pushed it until they were about to throw me out. And they finally told me, you care too much. That's what they told me. You care too much. I care too much? Your company just killed 15 people a year and a half ago, and you're sitting here telling me that you're going to qualify people using whoever happens to be free from the other department is going to come over here and do the final checkoffs, and you're telling me I'm the one that cares too much? That's the kind of stuff that just really, really got under my skin, because don't sit here and tell me that safety's first. It's not. Running that plant's first, and you'll endanger people's lives to do it. I've seen it too many times. And if you say I'm wrong, you're a liar. You're a liar, because I saw it too many times. I saw one plant, honest to goodness, hand on a Bible, no kidding, what they did for their procedures. You know, by law, you're supposed to have the the indicators in the procedures. It's part of the OSHA reg. How do you know when to do the procedure? And so the entire set of procedures at this one facility, they went through, and in the procedure, normal operating procedures had the high and low trip points as normal. In other words, the high is when it trips and everything shuts down, or the low is the alarm points, basically. Not the alarm points, the trips. Okay, the high and low trips were the normal operating range in the documentation. And I looked at them, I said, well, what is this? And they said, well, what they said flat out is, we don't want to tie our hands. We don't want the procedure to tie our hands, because if we write as what really is the normal, and the once or twice we end up having to run outside of that and we get caught, then we're operating it outside of normal, which you have to explain. Therefore, we just made normal, as long as it hasn't crashed, then it's normal. And I say, you can't do that. You can't sit here and look me in the eye and tell me that you're going to tell the new guy that it's correct and proper to operate this plant that far from crashing. And they said, oh, yeah. And that's what they did. I couldn't talk them out of it. And so what happens? They don't really get used. They have all these procedures that's just a huge waste of time, because they don't use them. They can't use them. You can't use that to operate a plant. And you can't use that to operate anything. It's because it's just a paperwork exercise. Don't waste my time. And why not, if you're going to do it, why not do it right? Why do it halfway? And that just frustrated me so much. Too many times, the operators there didn't know how to shut in the feed. They didn't know how to do anything, because we didn't take the time to train them. I mean, true story. The what is it? New Horizons, Macondo, cost $65 billion. Offshore leak explosion, $65 billion. Okay. And I had worked for that company, and I had worked for different facilities for various different contractors. And I can tell you, they're no different than yours. We got a job to do here. Money's tight, deadline's here. We got to get this thing going. $65 billion. Now, I could guarantee you that if I could go to them and say, okay, look, I've got a time machine, and for 10 million, I can go back in time to 6 months prior to that accident, and I could put some things in place that would prevent that $65 billion loss. And it'll cost you $10 million. Well, how fast can we pay the check, right? 10 million, that's a drop in the bucket. Okay, so if you go to these same companies in advance and you say, okay, I don't want 10 million. I don't even want 5 million. I don't even want a million. Give me $600,000-700,000, and I'm going to put in a no kidding operator training thing, and we're going to make the procedures right, and we're going to do what we have to do. We're going to put in a 5th shift so people come in, or whatever we got to do to actually train people to where they actually know what they're doing and the procedures actually work. And all it'll cost just $750,000. Oh, well, we're busy, and that's a lot of money, and things are tight this year, and golly gee whiz, we got this, this thing we got to do that's coming up with a deadline. Okay, you're rolling the dice. You're rolling the dice. $65 billion loss that could have been fixed with 500 to 500,000 to $1 million, and they didn't want to spend it. And that happens all the time. And so don't look me in the eye and tell me safety's first, because you're a liar if you say that. If you telling me safety's first, do a stop work. How many times have your leaders, how many times have your guys on the ground working the project said, oh, okay, well, we're just going to have to be late, and the startup's just going to have to be late because we're actually going to make sure that it's correct, or we're all kind of running ragged. We're We're going to take one extra day, let guys go get a good night's sleep before they come back in and try to start this up. How many times would they actually say, we're going to slow it back, stop the process, we're going to fix it, or are we going to, well, we could push it. We're going to push it. And that's what happens. That's why you got a Macondo. That's exactly the reason. So compliance does not equal safety. Too many people think they complied. So much CYA training, my goodness, all that CYA stuff, all that stuff about all that nonsense compliance training. What ends up happening is that you've got all this stupid stuff that is required by some law somewheres, or somebody thinks it is, and the stuff that's really, no kidding, important gets lost in the shuffle because people just get so used to. There's so many companies put these procedure training. Okay, all you're really doing is checking to see, did they open the file, and the system, the software system, records that they opened the file and read it once a year, or you actually sat down and went in it. If you go through 30 of these in one afternoon or one night shift when nothing else going on, how much did you actually learn, right? Managers have had compliance drilled into their heads to the point that they equate compliance with actually performing safely. And it's just not. We found people, I saw people, you know, the JSAs, what we used to call them, JSA, job safety analysis. You're supposed to, before you go do the job, supposed to sit down and do this JSA and line out everything you're supposed to do and talk it through with the crew and sign the sheet, turn it. We found people photocopying them. They'd photocopied it so many times they didn't even know what the original job was, right? And so that's what actually happens. You want compliance, you'll get compliance. You want papers filled out, you want some record, they'll fill out the records. It don't mean they actually know what they're doing. It don't mean they're actually safe. It don't mean they actually stopped and mentally went through the mental checklist with the whole crew. So lack of end user focus. Too many times Murgatroyd, the engineer, wrote the thing and it's written in some complex thing, or it's written by somebody that's intentionally trying to just get the document done. Instead, you know the guy that knows how to do it. Go out to Bubba the operator. Bubba knows what to do. And say, hey, Bubba, what should I write in the procedure when I write it down for that guy he barely qualified? He's qualified, but he just got qualified and you don't really have all the confidence in him. I want to write my procedure for that guy. What do I have to put in there so that he'll get reminded to do it right? Oh, you put this and that. Let's put that in the procedure. Let's word it like that. Word it like Bubba says, right? Start with the workers. Ask the guys on the ground with the dirt under their fingernails, what do we have to do to make sure that this happens every single time and nothing gets forgotten and it gets done right every single time? What do we have to write into the system? Start there, and then tell the lawyers to go take a long walk off a short pier, because too many times these projects get driven by the lawyers and it turns into legalese gobbledygook that is just there for the audits, and people get hurt. Instead, start with the operators, start with the maintenance techs, start with the guys out in the field and say, what do we have to write down so that this gets done right every single time? And start there and make that comply. You got to comply, but start with the operators and make that comply, and tell the people that want to crowd it up with legalese to that we're just not. I sat on the 24th floor of a building in a downtown area one time with, this was asbestos lesson. Oh, asbestos, it's really important, right? So what we got to do is I sat there with the corporate head of safety, the corporate head of environmental, the corporate head of industrial hygiene, and the corporate head of training, and little old me, right? And we're asbestos lesson. Well, what do you got to know as the company guy for asbestos? You got to know how to recognize it, and you got to know to leave it alone, call somebody. Don't touch it. It'll make you sick. You'll get cancer. don't touch it, call somebody. That's it. That's it. Oh no, because we might get sued, right? So we're going to approach this training lesson where we don't want to get sued. So I fought this till I gave up. They ended up putting how many fibers per cubic centimeter of air was allowed by law, how thick the plastic had to be when you seal off the area, how much negative pressure you had to put on the room, what HEPA filter number you had to have on the vacuum cleaner when you're cleaning. None of this stuff the operators had to know. But they crowded the lesson up with all this technical gobbledygook that had nothing to do with what the operator had to know, but it had everything to do with trying to prove to the attorneys that we actually had training here that the few things that the operators did need to know get lost in the shuffle. And so they spent tens of thousands of dollars paying me to create a lesson that nobody could understand. And because they had so much detail in it, 6 months later, the government changed how many fibers per cubic centimeter of air was allowed by law, and the whole lesson was out of date. So they threw tens of thousands of dollars down a rat hole and wasted a bunch of people's time, and nobody learned anything. When they could have said, okay, what do we have to do to make sure nobody gets sick? Let's do that. Let's put that in the training. So managers, have some backbone, have some kahunas. Tell the lawyers, I'll call you if I need you, and do what has to happen. Tell the plant manager, well, your job's just going to have to be on the line because I'm not starting this plant up until the people know what they're doing and I'm convinced it's safe. And if it costs me my job, it'll cost me my job because that's what I had to do. I had too many deaths happen in and around me that I said, I don't care if it costs me my job. I don't care. I'm going to do what it takes to try to be safe. And was I the favorite guy on the crew? No. Did I get all the advancements? No. But I went home at night with a good conscience. And because again, I had a solution that if I'd have poked my finger in this guy's chest and said, you really, really need to do this, I could have saved 15 people. Could have saved 15 people. Now, that's all the problems. And you guys all know all that stuff too. What has worked well? What actually works? Okay, keep all the compliance rigmarole that's useless. It's out there, it's useless. Everybody knows it's useless, but you got to have it to show to the idiot auditor guy. What works? People who care. That works. People who care. I had one chief mechanic that every single job he ever worked on, nobody ever got hurt. They were always really done well. Nothing ever broke. All his equipment ran really well, ran a long time. Nobody ever got hurt. Nothing ever broke. And what are you doing? And he says, well, what I do is before we do anything, we go up into the shack where it's quiet and we calmly, carefully talk through everything, step by step. And I even set in on one of them. It was a simple little job. Even I wasn't even doing on the crew. I was just sitting there. I was getting impatient because he's methodically, slowly talking through every single step. And he did that every time. Did it take an extra half hour? Yeah. But guess what? That extra half hour saved an extra week or two of redo down the road and save mistakes. So what happened? What's the best thing for safety? People who care. People that go in, there's these behavior-based safety programs. That was the best one I ever saw. Was there was one that major company that walking up the stairs without holding the handrail, that's real serious, right? And so we're going to say if you see somebody else walking up the stairs, not holding the handrail, and you don't correct them, if you see somebody and you don't correct them, your job is on the line. You could get fired. So more rules in this company's mind means more safety. No, it just means more rules. It doesn't mean more safety. All it means is now you've got more rules. What really does help is that it make it okay to tap somebody on the shoulder and say, hey, bud, I'm worried about you. This doesn't look safe. Let's stop for a minute. Let's talk about it because I care about what you're doing here. I'm worried. Okay. And make that okay. Make more near misses okay to report. Okay. That's what makes it safe. And the other one is, again, managers don't let the lawyers run over you. And here's another example of how regulatory compliance is counterproductive. MOC process. I worked at places that had 600 steps to an MOC. 600. Yours probably close, but 600. Nobody really knew because there was so many, but it was about 600. And people were doing, the guys in the crew were doing a double handful of those every week. Okay. So if you've got 10 of these a week to do, and there's 600 steps in all of them, how much brain power are you actually spending on each one of those little check boxes? None. You're not. And what happens is because uh, 11 out of those 12 MOCs are really dumb, and that 12th one is really important. And there's one particular step in that 12th one that's really important. Okay. Then because of the other 5,000 check boxes you got to do, you don't pay attention to the ones that do. And so more reporting equals less safety. More compliance equals less safety. What does equal more safety? Care about your friend. That's what does it. And we're actually gonna, okay, we're just gonna have to be late and we're gonna cost extra money because we're not ready. The people aren't ready, and I'm not convinced. I'm not comfortable that they know what they're doing. We're gonna take an extra shift and just talk it through, and or we're just, that's what's going to happen. We're going to redo that procedure and talk it through, even if we have to be a week late. That's what's got to happen. And if you don't have enough kahunas to stand up and do that, then you can be the one to have to tell the family that all the people just got killed on your shift, because it happened around me too. Again, I had them lined up on the wall on my desk, right? And so with that, that's kind of my rant. More does not equal better. More does not equal better. I just saw too much of it. Better equals better. Better equals better. And so with that, that's my rant. Uh, I'm retired. I'm all riding off into the sunset. Too many unsafe things happened around me. Too many times where I saw guys take RVs off of live tanks. I mean, all this kind of nonsense. And it's all because people just weren't taking the time to be careful. That's what's safe. So, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to make it better?